Right, this is going to be another episode of the Best Damn League Show period with me, and this episode, not Dom, is played by still not Dom. This time it's Yamato Cannon. So it's closer. It's still like on the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon separation. We are closer to Dom. We've got like, essentially, here's what I'm doing now, Yamato. Now I'm like the groupie who has to sleep with the bassist to get to the lead singer. You know, I have to sleep with the bassist to get in the room backstage. And then, you know, next week, maybe I get to the lead singer. Who knows? Or maybe, in this analogy, maybe next week, actually, it's just some roadie who's putting up all the scaffolding. I'm fucking, who knows, right? Let's see who the next guest will indeed be. Also, Yamato Cannon.
We're predicting it.
Okay. That's not a bad analogy there for the roles being played within the sack, you know. In a way, technically, you do need him, but he's not absolutely essential, can be replaced. So, then again, since it's Gilius and I have heard some of his jokes, I probably shouldn't make any jokes about Germans being replaced. So I was careful how I did that, though. You see that, Yamato? What I learned over the years was don't say the quiet part out loud. Just leave that part quiet and then go. Here's one thing people don't know. Obviously, Yamato Cannon was recently the coach. Not that recently. We'll just stress, really, not too recently, the coach of Carmine Corp. Like, we're still going to distance ourselves from what's going on with that. But he obviously was a coach for the last few years. Now he's doing content creation. If people don't know, I've actually never spoken to him about this, but I actually will guess from knowing a lot of players and figures. Obviously, I've done tens of thousands of interviews and talk shows. I can usually guess what people's sort of motivations are doing the show, what they like, you know. One thing I would guess is this. I think Yamato is one of those people in the industry. There's a few people like this, where what they actually appreciate about my content isn't any of the things you guys think, like, you know, history in the scene, you know, like wit, ability to articulate, to wax lyrical, you know, to analyze, to host great content. I actually think, for real, what Yamato likes is that in the industry, people know loads of stuff like this person's a dickhead, they're annoying, fuck, that's just bullshit. But you can't say that stuff, because if you do, you get fired, you get wrecked, it ruins all your... So I think they like it when some little prick like me comes along. It's just like, yeah, but here's all the stuff everyone wishes they could say, but you can't. And then they're like... and then they just do that. You don't say it. +1. You just go, silly old Thorin. I secretly agree, and I'm so glad someone said it. That old Thorin with his crazy rants. I think that's, am I right? Is there an element of that? Is that what you fuck with? I think?
Definitely. It's like, I've always had the philosophy, I need to carry my ammunition, because it's like you just carry your ammunition, and then a day comes where you leave everything behind in a smoke and flames. But I'm in that period in my life where I'm keeping doors open, but maybe at some point in my life I will start closing doors and not give a fuck anymore.
I will say there are also, I do also notice there are quite a few pros that actually do just low-key like the thing where I just like have the dossier on everyone, and then when they fuck with me, it's like, right, well, because like there's even some pro in some other game that even said that their team was just like, Thorin just have like an Excel spreadsheet, and then when someone fucks with me, just goes like, you know, Control F, like searches down like, on 2018, you said this at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, like, what the fuck? Like, and then I pull out the fucking receipt, don't I? Like, there we go, the receipts. We've got all the receipts. Mate, I've got more receipts than the fucking IRS, so enough about that. But
I wouldn't want to be on your bad side, man. I wouldn't want to be on your bad side. I remember this one time, bro, like I remember there was like Reapert. He did like a video about like card games and how he relates it to drafting.
Oh, yes.
And then I made a tweet. I was like, guys, you don't need to play card games to draft.
Sure.
And then you came after me. I was like, no, I don't want this.
Okay.
Fuck this shit, bro. Fuck this shit.
I will say, to be fair, I actually, looking back, realised you were just trying to make more of like an abstract point about like, you know, you don't have to do this thing. The problem with that, Yamato, is I just thought you were doing like a subtweet veiled shot at LS, because obviously his whole thing back then was like, it's all Magic the Gathering in colours or whatever. So I thought you were trying to like sort of shoot a shot at him, but actually your point was obviously valid. It is true. You believe it or not, you don't actually have to know about collectible trading card games to coach a team.
No, it's like, with Twitter, if you phrase it in a way that leaves open for interpretation, which obviously happens a lot because it's like limited characters. It's the game. It's like Twitter doesn't seem like real life to me at all, man. Like Twitter is so strange. It's like it's just a game.
Yeah.
It's like none of the conversation we're gonna have here of anything similar. It's like when I read the Thorin Twitter, I see the zingers keep coming, but it's like it's made for that platform specifically, you know?
Yeah. Right. Let's get into some fucking League of Legends anyway. Because there's so many directions we can go with this. But I actually think, as everyone knows, like, put it this way, I'll give people a little bit of insight into who I am as a person, right? I have, as I've gotten older, mellowed out Just a little bit. Just if you knew what I was like before, I was way worse. Just a little bit. But part of mellowing out is like, you know, now I have a bit more patience. I can lean into things. When I was young, I was the sort of person who was super impatient and impulsive. Like, for example, like the joke would be, even when I would get into like, you know, like some rock or like metal band, I would always be like, no, what are all these like fucking ballads and shit and acoustic tracks? Where's all the hard shit? I just want to, you know, I was like, I just wanted that like all the time, right? So basically, same style. We're not going to ease into the show. Let's just go straight into the heart of this motherfucker. So here's my question to you, Yamato. Even though I will say he didn't do it in both these games this week, you can't blame both of them on him. It is time for the Yamato Cannon Defense League to actually take up its arms, because you're going to have to explain to me in 2024, Yamato, you were coaching this guy in 2022. In 2024, Vitality's Hylissang, are you ready, is inting a few games. Now, you might be familiar with this behavior / playing style, as some have dubbed it, right? As I say, he didn't actually do it both games this week. One of those was nothing to do with it, his loss. But he's obviously had his split again. He's having some issues. People, I mean, his problem always, this is why actually, as a more serious topic, I do want to talk about this. His problem always will be, Yamato, since he is sort of like a playmaker / someone who through the engage starts fights, etc. If you lose those fights, you're always going to look like you were wrong, and you're always going to look like you're the one that entered the game. So I will say, even at his best, he always was set up to potentially be the guy who gets blamed. But I want to get where you're at on this one, because obviously we've had years. You had a split back in 2022. I would say last year, I'd forget which exact one, maybe the first one. There was one where Hylissang was having problems with cars. He's had his splits throughout the years where people have said he's running it down and it's criminal, blah, blah, blah. But the sad thing is, actually, most people agree last split he was pretty good. He sort of had it back together again. They were getting it together. It's actually why everyone was quite hyped when the Lincoln Sky was joining this team. I thought it's like the last piece. Maybe this really is what Vitality's promised to be the whole time, which is like a top 3 team. Obviously, they aren't at the moment. And so some people think Hylissang's regressed. Where are you at on the Hylissang thing currently? Where are we at, mate?
I definitely think that this is probably, like, in terms of his individual performances, like weakest year in terms of his career. I think Hilly as a player is very unique, because I think early on in his career, he was a heavy outlier, and he was like ahead of the curve in terms of how he approached the game. Like, I remember like how you prepared for Hilly was basically, you just told your teammates, like, if Hilly is missing, he can be anywhere. And at the time, it was such a wild thing to tell your players, because it was just not something that people did. It's like people open on bot and open sometimes on mid, and it's like when they did, it was like, wow. And I think for the longest time, I think Hilly is a player that needs to feel like there's concrete direction within the game, and also he needs to feel as if he is completely trusted in what he does. And then the third is that I think Hilly, in off seasons, likes to distance himself from the game, like, a lot. He like takes time off the game and then he jumps into the season. And then in that process, for example, and for us for 2022, when he was getting back into form, like, this is where bonds need to be built and trust needs to be made. And depending on how you view your teammates in that certain element, because Humanoid and Hilly were very incompatible.
Right.
Like, Humanoid had one way of playing the game, and he just viewed Hilly at the time.
Put it this way, Yamato, just from things I've heard, let me just say this, and you could obviously you can't say everything behind the scenes. I've just heard essentially Humanoid is the sort of person who does think he has a very strong game knowledge, and the idea would be in a review, he is the person who'll tell you, I don't think you did that right, or this is wrong, whatever. So as a result, like, it does seem like naturally he's not going to understand a lot of the moves Hylissang's making. I see what you mean. They seem like chalk and cheese, as we were saying. They don't really fit, right? Because to him, I'm guessing he thinks Hylissang's making like the wrong decision all the time or something, or he doesn't understand what he's doing, right?
And the reason I brought up 2022, because I'm pulling from like my time working with him, is because like he as a player in that environment where Humanoids has a very certain way of playing, and Humanoid has also a way of working. Like he will do his part as a player, but he will quickly give up on the part of him being a teammate if he feels like, if he puts effort into you, like understanding something, and it doesn't work maybe the second, the third time, he will like distance himself.
Does he have trust issues?
Very cold.
Does he have trust issues? Right.
I would say yes, he has trust issues.
Right.
I think like individually super talented, but as a teammate, he doesn't have that force to drive teammates. But nevertheless, back to Hilly. Hilly, I imagine in this team, what's so strange is that like the conditions that they find themselves in are often very good. It's like they come out of early game, they come out ahead. They lane well. I think that Hilly and Kazi lane well most of the games. Is usually, like, for example, the last Alistair game that he played, there was 006. He was like finding some good angles. It was looking like a classic vintage Hilly game. But then over time, how I recognize it from my experience is that Vitality the whole year as mid-game, late-game approach, it seems like there is a clear lack of like direction. There's just no lack of direction. And I think if Hilly feels like there's no direction in the game, he's only going to view the game through the lens of his own champion. And this has been like a weakness and the big strength of Hilly. It's like when Hilly had moments, like for example playing Leona, there's this meme I always pull up on like the SAC streams, is like say, like he was in the game, enemy AD has no flash cleanse. And in the game, Hilly said, because no one was talking, guys, I have a Giant's belt. This guy has no flash cleanse. This is the strongest I'll ever be in the game. If we don't fucking fight now, we are gonna lose the game. The thing is, in the game, we were like scaling. Like our AD was hitting 2 core, 3 core. We were like scaling better. And Humana was like, what the fuck are you saying? But Hilly is looking at the game through the lens of his own champ. And I'm feeling now with Vitality, I thought that with Linsas coming into the picture, I thought that, they worked with him in the past, they know how he functions, maybe they add him to add that structure that is necessary. And I think that when that structure is not there or not clear to Hilly, he takes it into his own hands and sometimes in very, very absurd ways. Because I think he likes to play a very active game. And if it's not clear what direction of the team is going, I think that he suffers as a player. And this is my description of Vitality as a whole right now, is that they just lack structure altogether as the game progresses. There's no ideas, like Veteo dies on side, how they contest mid, the jungle support looked a little bit better the previous week, looked a little bit the same in terms of this week. And they're just missing that part, I feel like. And I think this is where Hilly looks very, very weak as a player as the game progresses.
Because the funny thing is, another thing I wanted to address on this topic to like also broach into like some of the issues Vitality's had constructing this roster would go like this. I look at this squad and I've heard so many stories about Hylissang teams in all his different teams over the years. And what I notice is everyone actually seems to have a similar perspective to me, which is it's actually the opposite to what a fan would say. A fan would think naively what you should do when Hylissang ints in a scrim, for example, is you should actually literally sit him down, show him like, look, it's an int, don't do that. And then essentially like over time, they hope you'd sort of like tame him, as it were, right? But I actually know every coach who's had success with this guy says it's the opposite. Essentially, it's the premise of like the wild Mustang horse. Like, look, you maybe want to ride it at one point, but you don't actually want it to be like a totally broken horse. It's just like in the stables doing nothing, because then it won't be a Mustang. It won't be like that speed and strength and power. To some degree, essentially, you just got to sort of like work with it, and you're not going to be too harsh and didactic and tell it how to teach it. Essentially, basically, I've sort of heard it described like this. Hylissang's more like you keep his mental in a good place. It's more like you coach the others to play with Hylissang, and then he does his shit, right? Like the downside of that, obviously, Yamato is, right? And by the way, I do agree with that. I do think actually if you sort of beat it out of him, well, then he won't get any brilliant engages, so you won't have any of the upside. You won't have that, but you won't have Hylissang. You'll just have an ordinary support. So the downside, though, of that approach is, it does mean essentially that like now the question is, who is the rest of your team, not who Hylissang is. So one of the problems is traditionally people would make the mistake of thinking, well, the bot lane's just about does the support pair with the AD. Well, look, we've nailed that already. Him and Kazi have had a great time the last year and a half. The problem you have now in League is his style of play. I also think a factor as well is like back in the day, not that many people did all these roams. Everyone does now. So now everyone first of all expects it, like you said. It's not even like some unknown quantity. And also like he's not even the best at it at the moment. So it's not like the upside's there. So the real problem I think you have now if you construct rosters is suddenly it's the other relationships that look off. Like, for example, the first thing I'd have on my like board if I'm going to consider signing Hylissang in the future, and I think this is the mistake Vitality's made, is my number one thing I want on my team if I'm getting Hylissang is I better have a jungler that understands how to play with this guy. Because I think the big mistake you've clearly made in Vitality is putting all these rookies with him. People who've never played with a player like that. Remember, there's no player in the RL's going to have had a similar style. And then I'd even say maybe in this team, you could even argue, same thing with mid laner. Maybe he needs a mid laner that wants that style or who knows how to set him up or the guy. Because I feel like, again, unless you're just going to kick the guy, there's no really way, like, he's done it for too long, guys. He actually has played this way for like 10 years with differing results, obviously. So, like, you're not going to make him tomorrow become like a safe support. And also, like I say, if he was a safe support, what's the point in having Hylissang? Why not just get some guy out of an ERL who plays range supports at that point? You know what I mean?
No. I'm with you. Like, I'm thinking back, like 2021. It's like Whippo and Hilly. It's like the whole premise of Whippo Jungle was the fact that I'm putting Whippo in proximity to Hylissang, because they understood each other at a level that was so insanely rewarding.
I believe he even said not that long ago, Yamato, on stream or in an interview, that one of the reasons he wanted to do the role of jungle was also because he really liked to team up with Hylissang, basically. And the joke is, even as a top player, he used to have come bot lane all the fucking time anyway. So you may as well be closer on the map, I guess, right?
No. Like, I think that you need to be really bought into what Hilly can do, because like his career is immaculate. It's like every team that he's been on besides Vitality has made finals, has won the league. Like Unicorns of Love was a fantastic team. Like they made so much like leeway in the league somehow with the players that never did anything ever again besides on that Unicorns of Love roster, whether it's Vardags, Exile. It's like PoE had a career and Kikis had a career with it also, whatever. Hylissang has an incredible career, and I think you really need to. In my mind, when I look at this roster, it's like they put in first Douglas, right, which was something that they just carried over from the previous year. Linkas as well. It's like I had the privilege to watch like scrims against Linkas, so I could see like the angle somehow, and then I got excited because I didn't know about the relationship Linkas had with Pads and of course Mac, and maybe they saw something to add to the structure. So I was like bought in. I rated them way higher than I should have, because it's really not working out. And I think like the main thing for me as well, when I look at this roster, I feel like when you have this bot lane and you have Photon already, like the mid laner needs to be a person that is more of a giver. I feel like a big hole in this Vitality roster the whole year in my mind has been the mid lane. I feel like Vitio has been very invisible after what I thought was like a breakout split in, of course, last year with Team Heretics. But that's also like Vitio was put together with the Yankos. And then you have Vitio now together with Linsas. And I think that these are players that aren't necessarily players that build roads. I feel like if you kind of mix maybe the Team Heretics roster and the Vitality roster somehow with the players, maybe you can piece together something that is way better, right? I can imagine a Yankos on that team with Vitio, and then all of a sudden Vitality would just be a completely different team.
I want to ask you what you think on the Photon one, because people will know I'm a fan of this guy, because spoiler, if you did like the Venn diagram of what I like in top laners, people are really good at laning, carry top laners. Like, I love these types of players. But the problem I have is, I do notice, this is another player, by the way, if we're doing the Hylissang guy, he's had a lot of fucking lucky junglers. He had Bo last year, and then now he's had fucking Douglas, and now Lincoln. Like, he hasn't ever had like a Yankos type. He never had one of the elite junglers in the league. So I will put that out there, because I always do think people are a bit harsh when you forget that. Like, he is a fucking Korean playing in Europe, and I do think he's fabulous at lane. But the obvious issue is, like, first of all, it looks like actually this split might even be his worst split. Like, he's had some games that was just a bit off, you know. Normally I'd expect him to win lane every time, look fabulous. Like, it's more the question of, like, how does he work with the team, right? The reason I bring this up is because in past splits, everyone did just blame the jungler. They just made it sound like if you just replace Douglas, it'll all be perfect, it'll all be elite. Well, it's clearly it can't just be that, right? So what are the other flaws in this team? Do you think Photon's having an issue with his split?
I think, like always, when you build rosters or like you adapt yourself to a meta, I think you always need to determine and decide who is going to be the actual role players. And I feel like Vitality tried so hard to be everything at the same time. Yes. Like the first initial week, they played the AD mids, AP jungles. They played the mixed bot lane. Sometimes they're playing Senna. Sometimes they're playing like the more IE heavy like crit ADs. Like Kazi can play it all. That's fine. And Hilly prefers to play melee supports, but it seems like they struggle in that process. Like the best example of this, of course, is like T1. It's like they work well when the role players can be jungle and mid. When the role players need to come from top or support, all of a sudden these players look much weaker. Like if we see Korea playing Rel or Alistar, even like when they won the World Championship, the big wake-up call was the loss against Genji when Korea was playing Alistar because they can't make jungle super work together. So I always go to this example of how important it is to have players that actually are capable of creating space, building information within the game. And I feel like Vitality is missing that, you know. It's like they're missing the player that is going to give them structure through the draft, and I think that Photon as a player, I think that you don't want him to ever be in a position where he should be playing like, let's say for example, the Scanner. Like I don't want him to be that guy. And I think as long as they, like as you mentioned yourself, is the jungle situation together with Photon, there's never been like a very strong pairing. And I think when you look back at Vitality, when he played with Photon and Bo played together, it's like they tried to piece it together. It's like we I think from outside, it was easy to say, yo, this team, they are putting Bo on tanks. They're trying to piece it together in a way that makes sense for them. And sometimes they try to do everything at once. I remember there was that one game they played like Kindred, Ari, Gwen, Lucian, Nami, and Lucian Milio, sorry, and they just lost that game, and then they just dropped any carry jungle forever just because they were like, shit, we need to make our comp make sense. But there needs to be a buy-in to everyone's identity on the team, especially in this format, because you're playing for 3 weeks, and if there's not a buy-in from like the 2-3 weeks of preparation that you have leading up to the split, and you're finding yourself when everybody else is like, oh, we're committed to this idea that we have, like GX. Like GX is like, oh, De Antonio's playing tanks and Rumble. It's like already the fact that there's a player that has a clear role on the team makes it so much easier for everybody else to play. Because even though I knew De Antonio maybe isn't the strongest player, it works super well on GX because he's committed to a role, and it makes everyone else's role so much more defined. And I think this is always the challenge that you need to deal with. And in the short time frame that is 3 weeks, 4 weeks, with super weeks after super weeks, you get kind of fucked over if you just miss the mark on this completely.
All right, here's my last question about Vitality then, because I actually just think at the moment they're just such a mess, there's not much to talk about. My main question about Vitality is this. It's the last split. Like, the problem was, Yamato, if this was winter, I'm with you. Like, by the way, I've been baited by Vitality every fucking split so far, so it's okay. In winter, baited, I thought they'd at least be, top 4, top 3, they'd be solid. They didn't quite live up to what I wanted in that one. Then after that, it was like, okay, but you see Vethio's coming along, like, it's developing, it's getting better. Okay, and now Hylissang's not hinting. Okay, fuck, all we need's a jungler. You change the jungler, like you say, even better. Like, I agree with you. It couldn't have been better media in that off-season around MSI. Like, the whole thing of like, oh my God, and now even Kami Corp's fighting for the player we want. Oh my God, he must be sick. Everyone wants him. He's super. He's guaranteed to win. And that's like, oh, but he's actually like friends with Paddy. I'm like, oh, this is the dream. They're ticking all the boxes, all the hype's there. So you finally come, and it's arguably as bad as it's ever been in Vitality. They might be at the worst they've been all year. So here's the question. There's not that much time, like you say. Are they actually going to turn it around, this squad? Because I've got to say, Yamato, this is the one where I want to believe. Like, by the way, I still think Ghazi's plays really well. I don't actually think he's have any problems. Also, the joke is, despite his career reputation, he's actually the one reliable element that does pretty much do his best every game. But I'll tell you what, he's in a bad fucking spot. So I have to say, when I look at them now, Yamato, like, my faith isn't eternal, mate. I sort of given up on this team a little bit at this point.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I don't think. I think. Like, I played with the scenarios a little bit, and there's a scenario where we have like a 4-way tie because like head-to-head and strength of schedule is exactly the same. And I think in a world where they have to play like some BO1s backs against the wall, I could see Vitality like pulling it through with like experience alone. And I think that they could probably make it to the next stage, but the ambition is way higher than that. I think both of us had the same expectations. Like, I put on my tier list my expectations for Vitality. I think I put them third, right below Fnatic and G2, of course. And in my mind, I think that the problems run a little bit too deep, and I think that I don't see it being solvable. Like, this is something that when I think of how they are as players, I think that they're too deep into their identity for them to reshape that. It's like, we can define Photon, I can define Viteo, we can define Hilly, and I think that in terms of how the roster is constructed, it just doesn't make sense. Like, they needed like a Niski in there. They needed a Jankos in there. They needed someone to piece it together. Maybe, I know people are not so hot on Perks, but Perks could be someone that drives, like a structure within the game that could go far. Just someone that doesn't need to bring any flair or bravado, because the main success from Vitality when they look good is when they play mechanical fights well. There's no setup. It's like, wow, they just won this 3v5. Very cool. Nice Rumble, nice Alistair combo. But the issue is, like, why the fuck are we 3v5 in the first place, Sure. That is the main issue. And I think if I don't see a world where they solve that, I can't see them breaking into like the top 4, the elite 4 of Europe.
I've just realised something, which is, I always used to think one of the reasons why actually coaching in League isn't that appealing is because, from knowing a lot of coaches, unless you are lucky enough to get the job at G2 or a Fnatic or that sort of a team, traditionally, and maybe Vitality, you just don't get the top players is the worst part about it. So it's not like you're playing, like it's Formula 1 and we're all in the same car. It's Formula 1 and one person's in a way better car than the other one, but then the fan doesn't know, and he acts like you're supposed to just win the league with whoever you have. But I have to say, the one thing you're making me realise is, players. I was too cynical. That's only in the early days you don't get the players. If you actually were in coaching at the right time period, it's actually frustrating, because what I realise now is, dude, you could have been on like the 7th best team in certain years, and because everyone else gives up on like mega players, you could just literally say like, I think I will recruit Soaz, Perks, Upset. Like, these players would just be available. Like, holy shit, because I have to tell you about, if anyone follows sport, like the entire game of football pretty much is about managers who are on the top teams scouting players like that who were once amazing, and you have to try and figure out, because some of them obviously will eventually turn it around and come back again. If you can do that, that's the secret always to going back to the top. Because the problem with the RL approach, which obviously has made people like Mac very famous, bringing these players up, is you can't hit the lottery every time. Like, they've already done an insane job with how many people they've brought through and developed and put in the right role. Eventually you're going to have times where it's a bust, it doesn't work, you know. Meanwhile, like, it might be difficult to sort of like get the old horse back on its legs, as it were, but if you do, you know what you get from it, because they bring all the experience and all that. Because as you say, people will laugh there, Yamato, like, he's just being biased with Perks. It's like, yeah, but we're not talking about G2. We're not saying replace Caps. We're saying like he could plug a hole in the problems they have in the system in a team like Vitality, which I think is a fair comment, because as I agree with you, of all the 3 carry players, the one who was the least relevant is Vethio, and he plays the most important role in the game in theory in that sense, you know. I'm with you, it's just a bit of a bomber. I mean, it's why this team never feels like the engines get going, because I'm with you, the mid game is where they go to die. That is where Vitality games go to die, no matter what the lead is, no matter what the lane in. Let's pivot though. You referenced Niski, and I'll tell you what, mate, this is my other team, because you know what, I'll do the joke now. Oh, don't worry, this might shock you, but I got baited by a team called Carmine Cop. But to be fair, that was only the first 4 weeks of this year. But enough about your career. Anyway, whatever. Because obviously, but I didn't get baited after that. Obviously, I very quickly gave up on that team and lost all hope. So again, you know nothing about that. So don't worry about that. And that's just an awkward way to phrase it. But here's the point. The team that I always get baited by, always, Yamato, is SK Gaming. Same with the last squad. Like, you could see the highs of Exacake. You could see those times that look, by the way, obviously irrelevant is like a fucking sleeper OP. Like, actually might be the best in his role. Like, dude, I didn't know anything about this Korean bot lane coming in. I'm even more hyped now, but I'm scared because this is what they do to me every fucking split, Yamal. What they do is, in the BO1s, you're like, fuck, they're really good, actually. And you know what? They're almost even beating the best team. Shit, if they can keep this up, and that whole if they can keep this up, it's like, and in the BO3, they're not too bad. It's that low bracket BO5, they always just betray you completely, or BO3. Like, they always just, at the end, they just never quite have enough. But here's the sad thing. 1 ticket for the SK roller coaster play. I'm in again. I'm fucking in again. They've got me back in, man. Because this ball, it actually looks like surprisingly good. Like, I don't know how they've scouted this random Korean bot. Dude, this team actually looks good in a league where half the time is complaining that there's only G2s any good. This team's actually starting to look decent, man. They should, at least for now, they're baiting me. What's your thoughts?
I'm liking SK a lot. I think massive improvement in bot lane, very obvious. I didn't like the community reaction. It's like, I've been fighting the good fight because people say, like, the conversations like, wow, they're getting imports, that's so fucked up. I didn't get ERL players. It's like people don't understand the issues that there is GMing at all. It's like all these ERL teams, when they want to sell their players or trade their players mid-speed, they want bank.
Yeah.
They want bank, which is ridiculous, you know, all things considered. It's like these players sign for better teams and they get worse deals and they get stuck in those teams. And then they bring these 2 Koreans over. At the time, I didn't know much about them. Rahel and Luan. I knew that Rahel did well in Damwon, and I heard that Luan, like, from the games, I watched 2 games. I was like, this guy is just there to have a Korean support for Rahel. And a massive improvement. It's like Exakick and DOS had such a low bar. A massive improvement in bot lane. I can sense some of the similar issues when it comes to SK in terms of how they progress the game, because I think that Irrelevant is a fantastic lane. I feel like Irrelevant is like Alfari 2.0. I think that in terms of his impact, I think when it's very streamlined in terms of how his champion scales, I think that Irrelevant is a fantastic player because of he can generate gold. Like, this is his strength. So when he's generating gold on something that is not scaling so well, like a Renekton, I don't feel his impact the same way. Right. And I hope that SK kind of recognize it. Niski the same way. I think Niski, when he plays the champions that get to push and get to roam, it's like the usual shtick. When he plays the Tristana, I want to see him farming the side lanes more. I want him to be more centered around the camps and actually, like, in winning positions, play the map in a way that generates just revenue. I feel like often when it comes to teams like SK, and sometimes I feel the same with BDS, the thing that is holding them back in my mind is the idea of just focusing on farm, getting to the key breakpoints, and then just doing a Nash setup. But instead, I feel like the communication sometimes lands like, we are stronger, we should fight. And then they're pursuing fights that are not necessary. And in the in-between, they're getting caught, they're taking fights in the jungle that are not necessary. That level of awareness, if they manage to adapt to that, and Irrelevant and, of course, Niski begin to actually farm side lane better through the conditions that they create through early game, I think that this could be a very, very lethal team. I think just the main thing, like Luon and Isma, I think in terms of their fight selection, could be a little bit better. But Rahel, I think that in my mind, Rahel and Ice have been like the two best performing ADs, and this has been like a super signing, because you watched the last game that he played on Kaiser. Like Rahel has this aura about him, is that when you press tab, he finished second item, you know that he's going to be impactful. I don't feel the same when I think of a player like Noah. It's like you see his items growing in the inventory, and it's like, yeah, but he's not the focal point of this team, so I don't really care about Noah having gold. Rahel has presence. Same thing with Ice, Kazi too, to some degree. Of course, now Vitalis is doing bad, so I can't blame Kazi. I think Kazi is really fucking good. But Rahel has that aura, and I think it's a massive, massive plus. I'm excited for SK. I like SK a lot. I'm on the train for sure.
Yeah. No, I'll even say as well, I was even quite cynical when I saw the bot lane picked up Yamato. I even thought to myself, maybe what they've done is just get some literal, like the meme of like some boring Koreans and just tell them like, look, you're not going to be the focal point, you're just going to go even, and then we're going to let Irrelevant carries the game. But then you watch, the Rael guy himself is a fucking carry. Like obviously everyone saw the clip. He's given everyone the fucking business right now. He made the super guy look fucking stupid, didn't he? Like the joke is the super guy's talking like he's going to beat Deft and fight. Bro, anyone Korean can give you the business right now, as Ice and fucking Rahel have shown. So you know what? You have to beat level 1 in the dojo before you go to the fucking top and fight the guy who has like a demon spirit inside of him, who fucking does a 700-mile ahead roundhouse kick that knocks your head off and all the ancestors come out. Like you're skipping ahead. You're in the final boss already. You're at level 1, mate. Chill out. So the problem I have goes like this though. When we come to this team, I actually have a question for you which goes like this. I noticed when you were talking about the teams that are flawed and what you would do differently, so BDS in their own way, obviously Vitality's a massive one, right? People are going to hear and that you have like a simplistic thing you want them to do instead. Basically what you're saying to them is, instead of trying to do everything, just do this, like set up for this part of the game, and that's where your strength's going to be. Maybe for this guy, tell him just play these champions, play this certain way, streamline the game, basically, is what I'm saying, right? The problem I have is this is where terminology ruins conversations. Because people in the modern day, for some reason, spam that term Band-Aid way too much, mate. And I don't think they realise, to me, a Band-Aid is like when, it's like the analogy, you've injured and you're just covering the injury temporarily. Like the Band-Aid's something you do to like win this match or win for a week or two. You're not talking about Band-Aid, and you're talking about streamlining the concepts, right? Part of the issue, as we alluded to, actually with Vitality is, I do feel like sometimes people make the mistake of thinking, if I have a group of good players, we can do anything we want. And it's like, well, that's not even really true, by the way, for the best teams in the world. Like, if you go to the LPL or the LCK, unless you're like the absolute best team of all time, pretty much everyone has a set way of playing, and a player that knows he's never going to be the carry resource, and that he's only going to get certain champions, and that he's never going to be the guy doing the gank at certain point. You know what I mean? I feel like everyone has that. So I would say it just shows your approach to the game more. Like your style is once it's a bit of chaos, you want to like reduce some of the signal noise and pare it down to something that's reliable, right?
I think that over time, like there's so many great examples. It's like super teams failing is exactly that. You have 5 great players that have a vision of how the game should be played, and there's a conflict. JDG last year, one of the greatest teams, they had a very, very streamlined approach to the game. It was repetitive. It was precise as all hell, and that is a winner. It's like always the teams that win championships play their games in a very, very similar way. I think that Genji is a very unique team in terms of having like a wide spread just because of how good their players are, but most of the time the truth is there. It's like T1 functions super well in very specific circumstances. C9, another great example of, this is a roster of a lot of great players, but in terms of how they draft, they had this ego about them in the previous years that showcase that they thought that they were good enough to play at all. And that is like the biggest mistake that you can make. And it's such a common trap because scrims can really, really delude you and blind you from the truth. That's why we see teams like Carmine Corp picking Caitlyn. Like that has to be like such a big big delusion that you're having success with this in scrims in terms of how that transfers on stage. Or like a lot of these teams are picking Nidalee. Like that's another one that is just fueled by the delusion of scrims and the proximity to how the games will actually be played on stage. And I think
dude, obviously you don't like to, crush people's dreams and tell them they're worthless or whatever. When you want people to believe and dream. But I do think, as harsh as it sounds, every time I see a Western jungler lock in Nidalee, I just want to literally pop up and go, "You ain't Canyon, bro. Put that away. Put that away." That's for trained professionals only. You know what I mean? Like, there's levels you have to unlock, Yamato. They haven't unlocked Nidalee jungle yet. You know what I mean?
For sure.
You haven't unlocked that yet. You just go back on that Sejuani, you'd shut the fuck up.
It's just it's like I think most teams, they're legit looking gamer legends. They're not looking like at the weighted win ratios. You pull up like Nidalee, it's like, oh, Nidalee's actually doing fine. She's 45% win ratio. You pull up who's won, it's like Kanavi and it's Canyon.
Exactly.
And it's like, what the fuck are you doing,
I know.
And it's like, come on, man. And it's like, Skarner's actually not doing that well. He's like 58%. He's not OP. Look, Mordekai's just beating him. It's like, yeah, but it's like top esports versus these fucking random ass teams in this fucking this play-in portion of LPL. It's like you have to look at the actual matchups, and if like great teams are winning with champions, it doesn't make them great, Well, it's like when it comes to SK, just to round it off, I think the key thing for me, I hope that over time they define the roles as much as possible, and then I think that Isma and Luon, they have the challenge that they need to piece it together in a very, very short period of time. But I think that Isma is lacking in terms of his game knowledge department, in terms of how he should approach the mid game. I feel like he's skipping beats, and I get like the ERL feeling from how he plays sometimes. He has like a decent early game, but if the early game doesn't pan out in the 1-2-3, I feel like Isma kind of loses his mind a little bit, I feel like he views the game in 30-second segments when a jungler needs to view things from like a 10-camp perspective in terms of how you map everything out and the beats that you need to hit. So my concern is, the main concern for SK is that these are issues that they had in past alterations too. And even though they have fantastic players that can carry games and win BO1s, in the long run, I could see like BDS beating them, Fnatic beating them, G2 beating them in the BO5s and the BO3s too. Sure.
I have one more SK related topic. It's not actually about the specific lineup now. It's about Exakick. Here's my question, Yamato, because this is one thing I hate about League as an esport. First of all, because it's so closed off compared to Counter-Strike, for example, you do have these scenarios where when you get benched, you just sit on the bench. Like, what I love about Counter-Strike and games like that is, at least within a month, you'll just be on another team. Look, it might be at a low level, but I'll get to see you play again. I'll see if you're good. I'll see if you can work yourself back and forth. Right? The sad thing about the fact this guy's on the bench is, I do think League is a game where it is like that old adage, like out of sight, out of mind. Like, the better this Korean bottling does, everyone's going to even forget the name Exakick. Yeah. And actually, by the time you get to the off-season, they might not even be the name on people's lips. He might just be not even in the LEC. And I think that is actually a travesty, Yamato, because I do think, even though that very first split last year, he was a bit overhyped because like the league was a bit weak and they'd had that little run, Maybe he got overhyped then. But I do think that the eye test showed this guy had real talent. Like, this guy put the carry in AD carry bit. Like, he could absolutely be someone who could carry a whole game for you and could be really, he's clearly has high skill level. The champions he was picking showed like a level of like confidence and aggression you want in a young player. People don't know he's only 20 right now. Like, he's still a very young player, but he's got a little bit of experience. The idea this player might actually be like cast away and he might just not be a player anymore, I think it's wild, because the stupid thing is, even though he certainly individually had his own flaw, like he could absolutely end the game. And by the way, when you put all those Zos in a team fight, sometimes you might just get blown up and lose the fight immediately. That could also happen. But I think the saddest part is this, Yamato. As far as I can tell, the main problem he has is that he just demanded he had to play with DOS. I'm not even saying it to diss the DOS guy. He just, because here's the thing I don't get about that, Yamato. He sort of pulled a power move that you can only do if you are like a legend already. You can't do that when you're the up and go. You don't have to, like in that scenario, you can do that. But my analogy would be, that's like if you're a strong swimmer, just diving in and trying to save some guy from drowning. It's like, mate, you better be sure that that you're a lifeguard. Like, you might be good at swimming yourself, but he might pull you under, mate. And then if you don't let go, you're both going to die in this analogy. So I think the metaphor's pretty up there. So, because to me, the saddest thing is, Yamato, this guy, in my opinion, should be in the LEC right now. I can look at a bunch of teams. I could name the names. I don't have to. There's a bunch of ADCs this guy's better than. But if the whole thing is he has to play with DOS, well, I think a lot of people are out on DOS, including SK Gaming. So I think that's the sad thing to me, because I don't want to see a world where next year this guy doesn't play. I thought he really had talent.
I wanted to say exactly the same. Like the condition that he plays with DOS, like DOS had one of the worst support performances like of all time in recent memory. Like we had some horrible supports in the early days, but were very, very terrible. And I want to say the exact same thing, like latching yourself onto DOS. I think that as they broke out, I think that they had an advantage. It's kind of like that Whiplash thing where like he was told to like practice his three time swing, and he just knew that that's what he's going to get tested on, so he's just practicing it all night. I think in similar fashion, SK, the bot lane, the Lucian, Nami, Yumi meta carried over for such a long time. It's like they played it in the ERLs, they played together in the ERLs, and the amount of volume they had on those matchups and those champions was super, super clear. So the test was always, how are they going to do when things move away from that direction? Because the difficult part about League, of course, is like you need to basically survive the test of time. You can't just function under a very specific meta if you're a complete bot lane. And I think that that's where the Exakick DOS bot lane were looking good. It's like they're playing Yumi, Lucian, the Zeri. He was popping off. He was doing well. And then over time, the meta shifted, and I think that they lost all of that steam. They lost all of that force. And I think that in that situation Exakick has put himself in, it seemed like his desperation grew and his precision just fell off a cliff over time. I think definitely this is a player that could do more, a lot more than he has shown. I'm just thinking from the perspective of what he would have to do again, because there's so many players like waiting in line, and there's going to be like a shuffle. Sure. Like Kalista's coming in, Crowley's not playing. Like I'm surprised that he decided to not be busy. Like if I'm him, I'm fucking busy. Like he needs to be busy.
Especially because, bro, the fact that he's French, you'd think get in the LFL team. You know what I mean? Just start playing again.
So I can be busy. You have to be busy. He shouldn't slow down at all. Just be busy, be busy. Make sure that people, like as you said yourself, is just out of sight of mind is very dangerous. Like just make tier lists or whatever the fuck. Just make sure that people know about you.
Sure.
Because that's how GMs work. It's like word of mouth. It's like a lot of GMs, they don't know shit about the game, so they rely on the opinions of others. And that's a whole nother topic, but there's that.
Yes. Right, let's pivot. By the way, if people don't know, I like to break the fourth wall. I'll just explain. If people wonder, how can you have spent 40 minutes on two teams? Because first of all, it's not a communist system. I don't have to spend equal amount of time on each team. Spoiler, if I don't like some team, we fucking talk about you, daft cunt. Secondly, that's where like the toxic part of me came out for a second there. And then secondly, and also it's the way it was my own intrusive thought, pretending to be someone else talking to me that I got angry at and then ranted at, but enough about my style. Right, then what I would say is this. Obviously, I also tailor it to the guests. Like, there's certain teams I think I'm more interested to talk about, and some of them we'll barely talk about at all. So one that we'll pivot to, because it's an obvious one to talk about, is obviously Fnatic. Spoiler. The joke is G2's the best, and that actually has made them get discussed less on this show, Yamato, because there's not as much to talk about. Fnatic will always be the number one team to talk about on this show, and not just because of the history and the fact, it's because like they are the one where it's just like that dreaded word potential TM, like always with this fucking team, isn't it? Like, and this week was just like, it's like they condensed the whole split into 1 week, Yamato. It's like, they're undefeated. Is this their time? They're looking really good. Oh boy, I bet they're the ones that can challenge G2. 2 hours later, like, oh no, they lost to G2 again. Well, better look next split. Except this is already in the fucking BO1s. Like, I feel like we can just skip the final already. Just hand G2 the trophy, bro. I can't do this. I can't over and over again. And again, I'm preaching to the choir on this one, Yamato. I can't keep watching the really good Humanoid games. I can't keep watching Humanoid internationally and then go, oh boy, if he did that in LEC, they'd win the championship. Then he plays G2 and I go, well, that's a shame. Better luck next split. Like, I'm sick of this. Because I've always said to you, I know he's your boy, so you're going to have to do a bit of defense again. Here's the problem I have with Humanoid. I've never, by the way, ever said he isn't skilled or he doesn't have carry games. He does. But I've always explained it like this. I feel, for real, I'm not even exaggerating, it feels like, on average, 1 out of every 3 games, he just does fuck all in the LEC. And the problem is, he is so good in a different of the 3 games that we all just forget it and forgive him and just go, it's all right, he'll come back, he'll get it back. But it does seem like, When it happens, though, like, here's the difference. If I think of the best mid laners in other regions, like, we all watch the LPL and the LCK, they don't seem to have the same floor, though. Their floor's way higher, Like, one of the things I've always loved about people like Chovy and Knight is their floor's really high, and then their carry game's just bonkers. Like the problem with Humanoid is the carry game can be really high. It's one of the best in Europe. But fuck, the floor can drop through as well, if you know what I mean.
No, 100%. I think just the main challenge with Humanoid always is like you need to surround him with very capable players. I think that he in my experience reacts very heavily to what he perceives as mediocrity, and if he gets like a sense of it, it's like usually what you want from a player, right, is in a scenario where someone is playing worse, you want that player to be like, okay, I need to fucking push extra weight and I need to squeeze even harder. He's the type of player to be like, oh, if my team is doing this shit, there's no way we're gonna fucking win,
right?
And obviously, I'm like paraphrasing what
we're making extreme
version
mind,
of course. And I think this is like the main challenge. I think that knowing Humanoid is like 2021 when he was like for sure the best mid laner in Europe and they were winning like the championships. It was like peak COVID. It's like something that's super important to Humanoid. Is something he reacts to super hard. You're just playing in front of big crowds. Like this is what he pursues and this is what he enjoys the most. And he was like winning championship, playing like Worlds in Iceland. He was like no crowd, nothing. And I think somewhere along the line, I think if he doesn't get that feedback in terms of what the goal is and the circumstance, he needs to be able to draw motivation away from that. And I think that as a professional, that's where he can do the most amount of work, because I can honestly say Humanoid is probably like the most talented player. Like Humanoid, Upset, and Bo are like the three most talented players in terms of raw talent. In terms of how good they are at the game and how they just play the game. But it's like the work that Humanoid has always needed is like how he is as a teammate. And I think that if you put Humanoid next to people that are like sponges in terms of how they take feedback, I got the impression that Elioya was this type of a player. When he came into the team, when Humanoid was like, you need to fucking do this shit. What the fuck are you doing? Elioya would just react and just fucking do it. He would just take it and he would just do it and he would grow. He liked this type of like tension and that level of push. And there's a lot of players that don't react well to that, There's going to be players that react to, oh, my teammate is being more cold and distant to me. Fuck me, man. What the fuck am I doing? And they're not going to react well to that. And then looking at Fnatic, it seems like this is like such a fragile team on the gameplay level and in terms of how they react to swings in the middle of the game. The floor is so low, and I think that speaks to how everything needs to fall into place in order for them to play good. And usually you want to have a team like in terms of like G2, in terms of how they've set themselves up. This is like the hardest, the toughest teams, the best teams always are teams that you need to beat 6-7 times in the same game. They're not going to give up. They're going to make you fucking sweat for it. It's the hallmark of any great team. Fnatic, on the other hand, I don't feel that same level of energy. And it seems to be based off of like how they talked in Legends in Actions and so forth. It seems to be like when pressure is on, they seem to collapse. Like, I don't know if you caught the Legends in Action. It was crazy, like how they made everything available publicly. Like Razork was just saying, plain and simple, like Noah is choking. He's not performing under pressure. And then like June is like when he sees his AD playing worse than usual, he just tilts off the planet because he's like, what the fuck am I playing with? And they just made this public, and that's a very tough thing to solve because they're so deep into it. It's like they've worked together now for such a long time. I think that Razor and Humanoid are great fucking players, but you reach a point where some roots are just too deep. And if you want to unroot that in the time span of like this, like MSI into LEC, I think it was naive to think after like a 5-0 that all of a sudden, that Fnatic would be like, oh, different, because they haven't faced their demons yet. And those demons always happen later on and against G2.
Because one thing I actually do want to bring up in this case is one of the factors this is why people think I'm a Fnatic hater, is when they've had all these splits this year where at times they look like the clear second best team. Like, in fact, obviously the joke is like last split when they started hot again, people were even saying maybe they're better than G2. Maybe G2's actually like, fallen off a bit, even though obviously they've recovered every time. The problem I have that makes me not able to ever commit to Fnatic as a true, like they can win the LEC, they can go and do like top 8 at Worlds or something. The reason why I've never bought it, by the way, like I'm one of the people who didn't think they'd do that well at MSI. Like, I'm not as surprised at what they did, because to me, that's exactly who they are. They played above the rim when they played top esports, and then they played below the rim when they played Team Liquid. Like, they essentially, the problem with that team is they sort of seem to play to the level of the opposition. And I agree with you, they're very fragile. They can be really good, but that moment they get cracked, man, they're cracked completely. And one of the problems I have with this squad is, to me, this year, I already thought he was good last year, but fucking hell, is Razork good this year, mate. But I'll tell you what, think of that G2 game. Any game he isn't good, though, man, does this team look bad. Like, bro, they live and die on this guy, like, on his back. Like, it's all his fucking moves. I mean, you saw in this game, by the way, because one of the few players in Europe who actually has the hands to, like, react to it, like Razork and Gidge, Mickey X was just blocking him all the time. It just made him look like a fool. Like, this game was a really bad one from Razork, this G2 game. And sadly, the second he isn't, like, a beast, because I think he's like, dude, you know what? It's an extreme statement, but I think it's true. For this year, Caps is certainly up there. He might be number one. But after Caps, dude, I think Razork might be the second best player in the entire fucking league. This guy's amazing. And so you see, like, when he's on, that's when Fnatic's dangerous. That's when everyone's, like, hyping him. If he has one off game, though, man, I lose hope. Man, I lose hope.
No, I'm with you. It seems to be almost as if, like, I know, for example, 2022, we beat G2 in the first best of 5 that we played them, and then in the second one we just got 0-3'd. And sometimes you come into a series and you are playing the middle of the series where you're in a state of mind where you recognize that your approach is flawed against the team that you're playing, and you try to solve it through yourself, which in sense will make you look a lot worse. And it was similar with FlyQuest, right? It's like FlyQuest at MSI, they had the situation where, the team is not functioning. It was clearly dysfunctional. It was very obvious that this team has a lot of fucking issues. And there's a situation where you have Whippo and Inspired. They're trying to win the game by doing way too much. It's like one kill needed to lead to an ace and an ash because they wanted to win the game. So whenever Whippo made a positive move, he would just try to win the whole game and just run it down with it. And then you had the opposite side of the spectrum where you have players that when they are afraid of the loss and they feel very uncomfortable within the game, they become too passive. They don't do the active move. And I think FlyQuest covered the whole spectrum of what it means to, let's say, choke in a way. And I think that when it comes to the Razor game specifically against Yike and then G2, I remember the series when there was also the best of 3 in the previous one where Yike was just playing back-to-back volleyball games and he just kind of ran the whole game, and Razor lost 3v3s on bottom side and played very awkwardly. It just seems to be psychologically in those series that they feel the need to overcompensate, because that's my impression of how Razor plays specifically against G2 in my mind. And there was such an absurd occurrence. I don't know if you caught it. The Fnatic G2 game, there was a moment where Razor's screen just fucking dies.
Oh yeah, when everyone was joking, like he turned his PC off. He had another moment.
He was shouting at the referee, "What the fuck is happening?" And then right after, 1 minute after, he just cues into the enemy team and asks, right?
It did look like they tilted him.
It looked like it just. You just flew off the handle, completely. The coincidence is too funny. I'm not gonna make clear statements, but the coincidence is funny. So my conspiracy brain has started ticking there for sure.
By the way, I'll tell you an example. We'll pivot to another team. Being as, if you talk about GiantX, obviously there's a lot of negatives. It's another team a lot of people don't have any hope for, and they're not a fan of the roster construction. The one thing I'll do is this. I want to get your take on this, because actually one of the points what I try to do is every now and then on the bottom teams, you do get a player though that's playing well. Dude, I actually think for real, people need to give that Jackie's guy his flowers, mate. This guy's actually a legit. This player will be in the LEC for future years, as long as the GMs keep their eyes open and don't just look at the record on the screen. This guy can. Bear in mind, I think he's in a very flawed squad with some really dodgy pieces at certain other spots that a mid laner should need. This guy's having some real carry performances, man. It actually seems like he'll play. It's almost solo QS. He's playing whether his team's good or not, mate.
I like Jackie's a lot, super much. I think the hallmark of any player that is going to have like a good career is just how far are they willing to risk. When I compare it, for example, to Zvyro, who just came in, Zvyro is trying too hard to maintain, he doesn't want to be a burden in the game. And I want to, if you are going to be a player that grows into something, you want a player that is capable of taking risk and has the confidence to do and take decisions that are requiring you to mechanically execute. You don't want a player that is a rookie to be like a passenger. And I feel like Jackie's, he hits all the boxes. I think even in the first initial split, it's like he played his young games. He like pulled the trigger, missed, but at least he fucking pulled the trigger.
Yeah,
I like that because this is a person that is going to grow, because you need that level of confidence to trust what you know before you become the veteran that is going to stay in the league and play in the league for a long time. You need to have confidence in what you know. Too many players, the rookies come into the league, think that they're going to reshape the whole experience, but the game is very honest. League of Legends is fucking League of Legends, and I like Jackie's for those things mentioned. I'm also surprised by D'Antonio. Honestly, I thought he would.
I mean, everyone thought it was
awful.
going to be a meme, right?
Yeah, I thought my man's going to be awful. Like, I remember watching him in the RLs. I thought he was awful. Pull up his solo kick down. My man is Master Elo, you know? Like, he's like 300 LP. He's just a tank player. Like, I framed the GX move like, oh, they're just going to have a player that is committed to a specific role, because I saw on GX, like, Oruanos like playing Jace and so forth, and they just have a player who's going to play tank. They're going to put Ignar and Johan together, play around bottom side, just streamline the whole concept of how they play the game. But I feel like D'Antonio and also Jackie's, they are the best performing players. Like, those are the players that you want to keep potentially coming into the next year, considering GX is a team that operates with obviously like a smaller budget. I feel like often in the conversation in the public sphere of the community and so forth, it's like a zero-sum game.
Yes.
Either you try to win the whole season or not. It's like no one can see
Yes.
GX as a success if they manage to get 5th or 4th. Like that is a massive success. Maybe it's a part of it is probably because LEC as a whole, in terms of where the teams are at and how they play, is very, very messy, and there's like a clear opportunity to like rise above, like GX did, of course, the last year, getting second place in summer.
Right, here's the joke, but look, we're assuming for now Yamato won't coach with GiantX, so if he laughs, please don't punish him in case he ever goes to an interview. But here's the joke about GiantX, okay? So it goes like this. So first of all, I also thought something similar, by the way. Unfortunately, when I saw this move, since the Antonio is absolutely a known quantity, he's even considered a fairly one-dimensional player, guys, and he's been around, it's a bit like Whirlib. These guys have been around 1 million years, like, they've all been here the whole time, guys. They're not rookies. We didn't just find them. Like, the joke is, obviously, this guy was on Giants for 1 million fucking seasons. So to me, it looked like they almost did this Yamato. It's like, because the year's basically a write-off if you're GX. It looked like they were like, look, tell you what, we'll get rid of the Odo guy, and here we go. As a reward, the Antonio, for your, loyalty and service to Giants, the organization, you can just play a split. There's your split. It's almost like, the gold watching retirement. Enjoy, your thing. Yeah. And after that, don't worry, we'll get someone else. Because here's the problem I have with GX/XL is I've seen a pattern start to emerge now, Yamato, which is, if people don't know, they have these years signed people to some big deals, and they've even given people like some nice contracts. But they keep doing this thing, I noticed, where they just fire people before the end of the year, whether it's fucking my boy, what's his name? I can't remember his name now. What's the Dutch coach of Fnatic back in the day called?
Young Buck.
Yeah, Young Buck. Whether it was Young Buck, he got fired after a short amount of time. Obviously, they did to Targama, Svethio. There's a whole bunch of people now, Odo now, are getting just fired before the end of the year, right? Here's the analogy. It's a mean one, but this is where I think you're making a mistake, GiantX/Tim Reichardt, whoever's doing this move, which is, once you pay the player and you sign that contract, like that contract lasts until the end. You're trying to operate like when you go to the supermarket, but you didn't check how much is on your card. And you're like, right, of course, have the milk, the donuts. We've got like the nice pastrami ham for the fucking sandwich tomorrow. We've got, the pickles, got the, and then you get there, and then the woman, right, that'll be 28.95. You go, there's one, shit, I've only got €15. Well, do you want to put some items back, sir? They try just putting items back. Like, it's too late now. You can't put the items back. Like, they're going like, this audio on me, actually, I'm not really sure I do want that today. Can I take that back for a second? You don't get the full refund. Like, that's how this game works. Because they keep doing this in XL, They keep like committing to teams and then just bail on them halfway through, which is in itself, by the way, a bit cynical. Because normally people say, if you can't like win, at least, sort of blood the players, like give them a chance to run out, like actually try some experiment a little bit. This team just seems to cynically just slash them and then bring in like a not as good replacement who might be like a tiny bit better today. But the worst thing is, and this is where the bigger point I want to draw to, Yamato. The problem I have is this: I don't mind swapping people in and out and trying people out, but I hope there's like a long-term goal to it. Like if you're going to try someone out and that ends up being your player next year, that's a cool move. Like for example, here would be the perfect thing, Yamato. You do give someone a split now, but that's because you do want to use him next year. So it's more like, let's get all the jitters and the issues out of the way now, see what sort of play. I don't feel like they do that in GX, by the way. I just feel like it looks to me more like it's like they really do just sign the guy now, and then they're even going to cut the replacement at the end of next year and bring some other guy in. So I just wonder in the project, I don't know what your thoughts are. I'd love to know sort of what their ethos is as a team. Like, who do they think they are as a team? You know what I mean? I can't tell if they think they're a big team trying to sign players, if they're trying to get like up-and-coming players, because I'll just say this. It doesn't seem like, aside from Jackie's, they ever find the talents. You know what I mean? Like, the rest of them, we know these players. Like, most of this team are even veterans if people don't know. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, it was curious, right? The conversation surrounding Jackie's, because like I remember the conversation was that their analyst found them through using like solo queue analytics and just
I know they're one of the
Jackie's.
teams that goes the hardest on those like tools. Yeah, I've heard.
And they found Jackie's like that, and
Right.
like the main thing that made me skeptical was that they claimed that they found Peach the same way. I don't think Peach passed like the eye test at all.
I know. Why are you using that example? Just skip that example already, you know.
It's like he had like a one good Lee Sin game and like went through,
Bro, that's like if I got an app and I was like, look, I've designed this new AI app, Yamato, that analyzes, and what it does is it predicts the future of a player. Look, I've found a player. Chovy. You'd be like, holy fuck, this app works. Be like, yeah, and check out my other one, Porby. It's like, why are you even mentioning that? Like, don't fucking mention the player that no one thinks is good. Like, just stick with the Trophy example. I'm with you. If you stick with the Jackie's one, that's a banger. It also found Peach. I think there might be some bugs in that software. I'd maybe like get the coders in. Like, what are you talking about?
But I'm with you. It's like looking back at GX history, it is kind of strange. It's
Just
like,
all over the place, isn't it?
They're just kind of collecting, like they're doing the old school GMing where often it's like they're just collecting the crumbs of the players that they can.
Yes.
And I think the Jackie's angle is cool because it's like I was having this conversation with the CBLOL, like a journalist from the CBLOL. He was telling me like how important all of the 10 teams are. And they basically have one team that is like fully developmental. They only have like players that they pull up from the second tier league, and it's just a full squad. I believe the team is called Team Aurora. Maybe I'm wrong. And it's cool that that's their identity. It's like that's their thing. It's like and maybe this is an angle the GS can take, because I'm with you. It's not really clear to me what they're trying to achieve. Like. They pull players together like that. Odoamne, Veteo, Targamas roster, like all of that. Like I saw that from miles away that this is going to be like, this is a team that's not going to function. These are players that have been on high performing teams, but you have to understand, like you have to see like the context of where these players actually work. Like Targamos was with Yankos and Caps, and you had of course Veteo with players like Mersa and Zanzara, and they were like always around mid lane to make him work. And there was in the end you have like a group of 5 selfish players that aren't road builders that were just put together, and it was just like they made like a spreadsheet of like the 10 players that played in the previous league, and it's like, 8 of them are gone. Let's just go down the list. Oh, okay, let's just slot them in. Yeah. It reminds me of this, when I made the Vitality roster with the whole Giant squad with Gilius and Jizuke.
Yeah,
it's
2081, yeah.
Like Vitality, they gave me full trust because like we missed the train on Upset because we were pushing to get Upset 2017 to put together with Vander. They gave me full trust because I wanted to rock and roll or go with Jizuke and Attila. But at the time, the roster that was presented to me was that we were going to make basically the Splice roster, like with Xerxe, with like Niski and like Kasing. And these are like the usual names. And my thought process was like, well, I don't want to make a roster of players that have consistently lost against the top 3.
Right.
I want to be dynamic, and I want to do something different, And that was like a crucial point for me. And I think that roster building made sense. And I think to some degree, LEC is lacking because there's some players that should be in the league that aren't, but to some degree there's also a point in time where that can be like a very, very big flaw. And that's how I see what GX have done in like the last couple of years, But the Jackies approach, I think that should be like they should be the team that just brings up rookies. Fuck it, if they're gonna be in the league, make it interesting. Yeah.
Let's talk about Carmine Corp.
All
so
right.
Here's where we'll start. Right, one of the problems I have is obviously people know I like the player Upset. But this hasn't been a great year for Upset. But here's where I'm interested to know, as someone who has coached him in 2 different teams, what you think of his issues. Because obviously he's had a couple of carry games that were pretty good. He's had times where he finally, especially with this new roster, actually this new roster looked way better for him, by the way. I'd even say if you watch that one game this week, actually Closer and him paired up pretty decently, actually. It wasn't even too bad. Like, looked like he could get that bot lane ahead. But the obvious problem I have is this, right? It's not as simple like a fan hopes. This is why I know they have no eye test pro. It's never as simple as like, if Upset does badly, he is bad at League of Legends. Like, it's one of the most slam dunk eye test players ever, guys. Where if you just look at the skills, it's clear this player is really good. But I'll tell you what, Yamato, I will say, as someone who knows him a bit, I do think that his problems aren't even in the game at all. To me, his problems are things like, does he trust his teammates? Does he think that, like, if I go in here, I won't just die and look stupid, and then people will say I died and look stupid, it was my fault? Or should I back off? Maybe actually I don't pull the trigger on this move. The problem I've always had in his case is I've always felt like he is someone where, a bit like that humanoid example, give him fair play. That's a player I don't like as much. I'll say it. I'll be fair and apply the same logic. I think in the same way, this guy loses trust in his teammates, or if he thinks you can't play up to a certain level, he might be a little bit selfish sometimes. What do you think? Because to me, some of what people see as like him being cowardly or he's playing for KD, I don't think he's playing for KD, but I'll tell you what, this is a player I don't think likes to commit and have insane risk that, like, who knows what's going to happen? Like, are you going to do it? Are you going to help? Are we all going to fight? Where are you at on this play? You've known him throughout the years.
I think I mentioned him when I listed off like the 3 most like raw talented players that I've ever worked with. Like if maybe I would showcase the votes sometimes. It's like of like how good Upset is actually like in solo queue, in scrims. It's like any pro player that has played against him in bot lane will tell you the same thing. It's like he's a fucking engine. I think that the main thing is the nature of the role is inherently very, very difficult. I think that he is a person that does well with gold, does very well with agency in terms of damage. I think that he was never a strong, like, let's say, Ashe player, or like Varus player, like Jhin player. It wasn't really his thing. Like, that worked maybe like in Schalke, but that's because they had like Nukeduck and Nukeduck, like Prime Nukeduck, whatever. I think the main thing that is Upset's challenge is, I think that uncertainty really, really makes him, play worse. I think that when he doesn't know where he has his teammates, he tries to like push his idea of how the game should be played, but he's playing the wrong role for it. If you're playing AD, you have to go with the flow that is presented to you. That's like Kazi is very impressive on this Vitality roster because it has no structure at all, and he is managing to actually generate farm, and he's trying to like Neo in the Matrix. He like fucking makes it work somehow because those Vitality games are chaos. Like, chaos for AD carries is very, very frustrating to deal with. They managed to grab a win on Kai'Sa, and Kai'Sa is the biggest band-aids solve. Like, it basically removes how you need to connect to your ADC in the mid lane and how you pressure the mid wave. And Kai'Sa can always join any fight. Like, she can just catch the wave, she can limp into any fight, and it's all good. She's going to be, participating. Like, that's a good solution because it cuts out all of the points that KC is struggling with. When it comes to Upset, as I mentioned before, it's just when he has uncertainty, I think that this weighs so heavy on him. And I think that stress with how the last couple of splits have gone, I think that it's seeping in as doubt almost. I do believe fully in Upset as a player. I think he's one of the most talented people of all time in terms of just raw game skill. I think that the main thing is just you need to find a way to piece it together, because when I convinced Upset and both to join the team of KC because I wanted to have firepower. Like, I knew that I can change 2 positions and put in 2 positions, and in terms of the names that were given to me, like, these are the 2 players that will allow us, if we piece it together in the long term, actually like compete for a world spot. Anything else that maybe functions better in the short term, like people talking about like putting in Synchro again or something like this, it's like that was something that Casey was already ready to move on from due to how heavy the previous year was when they won the EMEA Masters. Like, I wanted firepower, and I wanted to make sure, like me knowing Upset, that we can create an environment where he has that certainty and he can actually like do well, because Bo and Upset played together and they knew about each other and they understood the changes that they need to make. And I think when that uncertainty seeps in for Upset, I think that he tries to solve everything by working through it. And like when things are going rough for Upset, he's the type of player, like he already plays super much solo queue. And if the team is going bad, he plays even more solo queue to the point where it gets almost destructive, you know? And I think at this point, after going 10th, I think the uncertainty is just so damn fucking heavy. Like, he just needs some reprieve, and that's the blessing here, that they managed to get a win, because at least they can breathe. There's some reprieve there, because KC has an org in terms of what they've done so far, in terms of where the players are. Like they hired players that are basically like mercenaries. They are playing for their career. Next year, if this doesn't go good, all of them are gonna get cut, and then they're gonna keep Vladi and rebuild with Kalist, right? So it's like the pressure is very heavy and thick in the air, but that's what you get paid for in the end, right?
It also kills me as well, because the Vladi guy, I can see why they put him in. He's a prospect. Like, he's had some games where he's shown something. My obvious question is this: where was he last split? To me, the second one was the easiest cut of all time, mate. You know what I mean? Like, of all the players in the team, he not only wasn't playing well in those early splits, but he also clearly, like I've never seen a player that was in it, like, as gun shy as him. Like, he just couldn't pull the trigger, mate. It's like he had, I kept saying, it's like he had that thing they say in, like, golf, the yips, where people, they, like, fuck up the putt because, like, something happens to their brain when they're in public. But if people don't know, the premise of that is sometimes in private they can hit it every time. It's just when the pressure component comes in, it's something short circuits. To me, he was obviously someone who had that. So it's not that, like, the Vladi guy's back. It's like, why didn't we wait until summer to bring him in? Like, I'd have had this guy, again, like I said about GX, I'd have also had him in spring, by the way. So he's getting just more reps. Like, it doesn't matter if the team's bad. We know the team's bad. No one would blame you specifically. Like, start getting your reps in, figure out how you're going to use this guy. Because I agree with you. It's obviously another one of the players. Like, this is obviously the player you're going to pivot. Next year, you're going to build this team around. Like, he's clearly the dude, right?
I think the main difficulty, it's like the KC anticipation of joining the LEC was built up for so long. And Saken, Cabo, Tagamas partially, he was in G2 shortly, but like they stayed with KC so long, and the anticipation for the move from ERL to, of course, the LEC is such a big shift in terms of what your day-to-day is. There's so many things to adjust to, because you are no longer playing in the comfort of your home, comfort of the environments that you are aware of. You don't have the same energy. You need to adjust to so much. And we were a team that started very late due to the fact that there was this Red Bull event that needed to be played with the previous roster, right? So we started very late, later than other teams. And I was very, very clear and upfront about how difficult it will be to adjust. And I knew that the winter split will, in most cases, go bad. Like, we are at the mercy of how everyone else manages with the same issues. And I knew that this will be challenging. Like, for me, always the narrative, like, not the narrative, but the idea was, we're going to, as long as we use our time in winter appropriately and good, the result just doesn't fucking matter. And I think in the case of Saken, I think that he did well in scrims. I think that he showcased so little on stage, and this was like the pain point. But I think that he really struggled with the adjustment period of adjusting to everything and moving from, you know, an environment where you've performed in, and then refinding yourself in Berlin, in a new environment, new teammates. And I think sometimes for some players this takes time. In some cases they snap and they are in that moment and they are there to perform. It comes back to what we mentioned, what we like about Jackie is like, he came in as a player into the LEC and he maintained what he was, and now he's playing in a way that is actively building on that, rather than coming into the LEC and thinking, oh, I need to be a new person and everything that I've ever done in the past no longer matters. You know, never lose yourself when you're moving up a league, because that's what has brought you there in the first place. And I think probably from Casey's side, they were thinking, yo, we need to give this more time. We have 4 weeks now to prepare. They are also, the main issue is that the winter split and the spring split, it's not coincided with the ERL, right? It's like you pull out Vladi mid-season, maybe discuss what they're doing in the LFL. And I think that's part of the decision, because I know that KC didn't want to put in Vladi this year even. They wanted to put in Abedage, but the offer that Abedage had, this is what my interpretation is, that he was told, do you want to play LEC this split? Next year you won't be playing, but this split you can. I think that from his point of view, is like, there's a chance I only play 9 games in the LEC when I can play LFL playoffs,
Right.
play Masters,
Right.
have a bigger volume. I think from that perspective, it makes sense because the daunting task is like you need to be like a caps level player to
Sure.
reshape a team at a degree to really like leave a name for yourself, you know. So I think those are some of the challenges that KC like faced in terms of how
Sure.
they needed to build something up. I sympathize with the whole situation because Sakan and Kawa is like they had such a build up for this KC moment to go, and then the pressure it's so extreme, especially with how like the fandom is, of course.
I think actually a very valid point you make there is I hadn't considered that. I'll draw the analogy, if people don't know, to that year where Grabs coached BDS and there was that famous thing where they could have had Crown Shot the whole time and instead he was on the LFL team, if you remember. But then like X-Matty was in the main team and everyone kept raging like, what the fuck? Are you seeing X-Matty? X-Matty is better than Crown Shot, right? And what they didn't know was, because Grabs couldn't say it at the time until he was fired basically, was his job, he was told actually, was both teams had to try and succeed. So his logic was, well, look, since the main team at the time, if you remember, was like the worst team in the LEC, since the main team's terrible and nothing works, there's no point also tanking the fucking LFL team to bring this guy up and what win, like, 2 LEC games. So his logic was like, may as well let that team succeed in the ERL level and then we'll figure out the main team the next year. So I guess you're right. There's some of that as well. People are forgetting that just because you're doing this like LEC thing doesn't mean you just don't care at all about the rest of your organization. Like you still have to like figure out what you're doing with those other players. Also, you don't, like you're saying, you're also trying to plan further out in some degree as well. So no, I get that point. That's a valid point. What about this though? I do think the one thing everyone's scared to do is because they've had the odd game that still didn't look great. Like they've had games where you see they're clearly not going to be a top team. I think people are being way too scared to just say this. It's not just because they won 3 games, guys. This is clearly a way better team than the ones in the past splits, though. Like, if you look at, like, especially with how many teams are really dodgy in the mid-table right now, Yamato, this team, look, I don't think they can make Worlds. That would be ridiculous to me. But, like, this team can be in, like, the 5th to 6th if it performs well. You know, could win a BO3 against, like, a lesser team. Like if you look down at some of those squads that are on the mid-table, if they play one of those teams, it's not impossible they could win a 2-1, you know? So what are your thoughts? What should we expect from this lineup? What would your takeaway be?
I think that they would probably like I see them the same way. Like I think that they would like compete with Vitality and GX for like the mid-table spots. I think that KC was very lucky to pick up 2 wins in the way they did because one was like off on Nash steal. Probably that game was very winnable right against Rogue, and then the steal against Mad Lions. It's like the someone's collapse is going to be someone's victory.
Yes.
I do think
Which,
that,
by the way, is also just fair, guys, because if you saw that winter split, holy fuck did Carmine used to just throw games to the other team. So, like, we're allowed to catch some too, motherfuckers. We spent all year throwing them out. We're allowed to catch a few as well ourselves. You know, just saying.
I think that the main challenge that like Bo and Tagamas, this was a duo that I believed in and I was hoping to work with longer. I think over time you needed to just move on because there was just no way of progressing the game. It's like our big issue in winter was that we had great winning positions. We had fantastic early game. We were probably like one of the best early game together with like Mad Lions in the league in terms of generating leads. We were very, very fucking good. I think in most games we had like winning positions besides maybe against like Fnatic, I remember. And we couldn't get a good fight even if our fucking life depended on it because we couldn't agree on the areas that were important, and it was very, very choppy in terms of how the communication worked. And this is something that takes time, and over time, maybe you can solve it, maybe you can't. And the challenge is, of course, how Tagamas is as a player and Bo is as a player. And this is something we couldn't piece together. With the change-up now, I think that, especially in the last game that they played, it was very obvious that, you know, with Upset being allowed to play isolated with the static shift Kaiser, then it was very easy for them to just say, yo, jungle and support, we have to right-click our mid laner. And they actually had a way of like progressing their actual like mid game. It got dangerous there for a moment because they chose to fight at a time where Ginzu wasn't finished, so Kaiser's lead wasn't like interpreted or useful in the fight at all. But they managed to get the catch there on Vitality. I think LEC is in such a state where, especially with the format BO1s are so silly because even in that game against Vitality, if Photo maybe doesn't make that mistake, or maybe Hilly doesn't get caught as much. All of a sudden, it's like such a different game. And it's just the nature of BO1s that like all of these things add up. But I'm hoping to see more from KC, because I'm hoping this 3-4 situation for them allows them to breathe easy, because I do think that they are stiff and they're playing worse than what I believe these players can. So I think the Targama showed good signs, Upsa showed good signs, and hopefully they frame this in a way as a very big victory. I think that's the crucial thing. You have to frame this as a massive fucking victory, and you need to use this as a confidence builder, because I don't think that they are performing as good as they can, and I don't think it was the case in the previous weeks either.
Did you see on the broadcast when they flashed that stat up for the G2 Fnatic game of what Caps' win rate against Fnatic is?
Yeah.
Bro, I need everyone to just take stock for a moment. Remember that for the majority of the time Caps has been in G2, Fnatic were the main, right? They were the number 2 team. They were going to Worlds almost every year. If people don't know, I'll read it out. He has won 42 games and lost 9. Bro, that is so gross, isn't it? Because in your brain, you just don't think it's possible. You think to yourself, think how many close games. You think about all the splits where Fnatic would nick like a BO1, or obviously famously there was that 2 finals where it was 3-2, right? Well, the joke is, when you think of that, guys, you're actually thinking of every single game he ever lost. He only lost 9 of these motherfuckers, and he's played 51. Oh, this is... He actually just is like fucking the messiah of European League of Legends. It's fucking ridiculous, isn't it, mate? That's ridiculous.
It's completely mental. It's like, you know, I imagine these timelines. There was this time where like there was conversations about Caps joining Team Liquid because they basically gave him like a blank contract. Like that would have reshaped the whole narrative of both regions completely. Like it would have changed everything. And usually, you know, I get shit for my time in Fnatic, but a lot of those losses that Caps has is under my time. I would just want to put that out there. I beat G2 twice. 2 best of 5s would beat them. So I'm just going to put that out there. Okay. The fucking G2 super roster, people were telling me that Ocelot was ruined the whole league by signing Reckless. True. You know, and they made that super team. And then, you know what happened? They didn't make Worlds.
By the way, even though at the time it wasn't actually that stupid a take, that has aged like one of the worst takes of all time. Because if you remember, when they signed Reckless, no joke, everyone's take was sort of like, what's the point in even playing? Just hand them all the trophies and they're at Worlds. It's like, and then they never went to anything. They didn't do MSI, Worlds. They came like fucking 4th or whatever it was in the league. Oh, that was, you're right. That was actually like the worst take of all time now. Because that was, everyone was saying it was a really popular take, wasn't it? Like everyone was like, yeah, you said, you're right. The maddest part that I'll never get over is they were blaming Carlos for a move that for him, he should do. Like surely he should want his team to get better and take his rival's best player. Like they acted like he should go, they act like basically like he's the older brother on like a video game. It's like, give your little brother a try. It's like, no, I'm supposed to fucking win. What are you talking about? Why would I leave him with a really good player? So, that was bantering fuck when it was. No. I'll tell you what, if you want a spicy one, we'll end on this note. Right, obviously we got to get into some Mad Lions, mate. I mean, everyone else in the league has. Whatever. By the way, if people don't know, the joke is I've become so self-indulgent, and by doing too many shows, I'm actually like my own hype man. It's like I set myself up for my own joke. Then it's like I basically throw my own alley-oop, then I run around and jump up and do a 360, and then I'm also on the sideline like, yeah, get him, boy, yeah. And so it's just me the whole time doing it all. And so anyway, the point I was going to get to is this. Mate, I actually feel like, jokes aside, there's some very serious conversations that need to happen about this roster, mate, because holy fuck is this a collapse. Like, it's not even just like, think about this, right? The players everyone memed on in the first split when they made the finals, like people like Frescovi, or is Super actually any good? Like, it's not even like they're just the ones doing badly. Like, dude, everyone on this team looks worse. Every single player. It's fucking crazy. Like, for real, I did think that Alvaro guy was the truth. The Merwin guy looked like one of the most exciting players to join LEC. Like, these guys have just, as you say in English, like withered on the vine. It's like, you just seem to see them get gradually less and less and less and less effective. And the downside just is the only thing left at that point. Because, like, for real, I think this organization, like, let's be real. If we look at it right now, they're not going to turn it around this split. This is over. They don't have giant superstar players. So there's no one's going to win you just a bunch of games for no reason. Like, the fundamental flaws are so poor. They're probably one of the only teams in the league, in my opinion, that almost has, like, no win condition. Like, how do they play? What is their build-up play? How do they start a game? What's the mid-game plan? How would you even draft them right now? I think they're in a really bad spot. And so the obvious thing I'm looking at with this team is this, Yamato. It's like, bear in mind, when you make this project, to me, you're actually sort of, when you make this project with El Yoya, the implication to me is it's actually a long-term project. It's not to just do it for this year. This is going to be generally what this team is. Maybe you move one player and out, like an obvious one is like, yeah, Friscovi, you are Polish, mate. I'm sorry, you're not Spanish, so you don't have to be in that team, bro. Like, they can bring anyone in. But you look at the rest of the team, you can see where they thought, I imagine, we keep El Yoya, we keep Merwin, we keep maybe the bot lane, we figured some things out, and as time goes on, we get better and better. It's obviously been the opposite. They had their best ever split at the beginning. It's gotten worse and worse. And right now, I think they're in a really tough spot for what you're doing this offseason, mate, because I've heard this story previously that, like, the idea of why this team exists is almost like to make up to El Yoya that he didn't get to go to G2 2 years ago. And it's like, well, you know what? You didn't like the last year's roster where you had all problems with Niski and stuff. Well, you know what? Fuck it. Pick the team you want. Who would you want to play with? What? Oh, the Melzek guy's your mate? We'll bring him in. Oh, you want to play with these players? Bring in that core, right? Okay, you want to play with this guy? Fuck Niski? Yeah, get him out. Bring in this guy. Like, he'd done everything he wanted, and I'll give you credit. In winter, it did look great. It looked like he was the one that was right, and we were all wrong. El Yoya was killing it. Right now, El Yoya's stock's not only tanked, but like, who would you even sign and kick? You know what I mean? I think they're going to be in a really tough spot next year, mate. What are you thinking of Mad Lions right now?
No, it's crazy because there's been like an extreme regression. Like, this team was a team that did very well early game. I think that they were one of the best teams in the early game. They were better than G2 in the early game, and they had like Alvaro and Lyoya were working together super well. It kind of reminded me of like how Kaiser and Lyoya were dominating back in 2021, how they contested Raptors and how they played. And it seemed like the hope was that there's going to be continuation, a build-up of that, but it seems that in spring, they tried to replicate the same thing, but in the process, every other team around them has gotten better. They started throwing leads. They didn't know how to like progress the game, and then you can clearly like pinpoint what the issues were in terms of like their understanding of what parts of the map actually open up when turrets fall. It was so extreme that in most scenarios when I'm watching the games, it's like, oh, Midwin just managed to steal a neutral wave on top. Instead of like walking into mid and leveraging the fact that they can cross into enemy camps by the virtue of the enemy top lane and needing to farm the top wave, he just continues walking with the top wave. Then he walks to hit the turret, never connected with his teammates, dies there, and it's like, what the fuck is happening? And in that process, they're like, oh, Mirwin is trapped on top. We have to run there. And then they run there, they lose the whole game, and it's like, what the fuck just happened? It's like, one time, okay, two, whoa, three, what the fuck is happening? You need to take some time off. Spring split to shit, MSI is happening, you need to go to the drawing board. But now, I feel like now in summer, like this, it's a clear effect of a team that realizes that they've had this issue, and now they're trying to reinvent themselves completely by picking these scaling drafts that practically play themselves later on, basically like these rogue drafts with like Jinx, Braum, Azir, completely removing themselves from what their strength was, just in hopes of trying to solve this issue they couldn't crack at all. And I think in that process, they've lost themselves completely. And I'm with you completely too. Like, I don't know where you go from here. It's like Elioya's value as a player and how he's going to be perceived after this year is like his value is going down horribly, because I think that as a player he was always very smart in terms of his pathing and understanding jungle, but now this year as well I feel like his mechanical skill just isn't there. It's like when I saw him playing Jax or Rengar or anything remotely that requires higher mechanical skill, he just isn't that guy anymore. It was the longest time where Elioya was the strongest jungler in Europe, but he just isn't. And I don't know where you move on from here, because the whole Mad Lions of last year, such a fucking disrespected fucking roster, just because they went to MSI, lost to G2 and T1. If you frame it like that, doesn't matter how you lose, doesn't matter what happens. It's fucking, if you're going to only look at their international performances and remove yourself completely from what they did domestically, you're missing that this team was the second best team in Europe by far. It was by far. And I think now the Phoenix thing that happened on Twitter, people posted a picture of Phoenix and how this roster was basically gnawing at the mind of Mac and Pad and everyone that was working in the roster from last year. I think this was quite like distasteful. And now you've made this commitment that puts you in a position where there's like, what can you do besides continuing? Like, what can you do besides continuing? You would look so bad. You would just look so bad because they gave up a lot of very strong pieces, as you said yourself.
I mean, obviously the saying in English, the old adage goes, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Obviously, in this case, Mad Lions is like, let's keep digging and join the LPL. Just a little joke there for people. Because in England, he used to say if you're digging, like, you're going to get to China eventually, is like the joke people would say if you kept digging. Like, so, well, I tied together two boomer jokes there. But what I would say is this, as a more serious note, is another problem they have on this team, and this is how bad I think it is. I will actually invoke your Carmine Corp. How dare I? But I'll do it as an interest, right? Because obviously everyone hates that team and thinks it was trash, Yamato. But as you said earlier, I agree with you. If you ever watched that team, actually the amount of times the early game went well was insane. The amount of times, like in the mid game, the team would be in the game and have agency or have a chance to win a game or have a bunch of dragons or something or have like the team fight priority, etc. Like that would happen quite often. So the difference is, even though in the end that lineup didn't do anything, one of the reasons why I would sort of keep thinking like, but maybe they could win like a game next week or something, is because I kept thinking a good problem to have is like, even if it's flawed, certain parts of the game works, right, I can keep some of that. I can maybe even build off it, or like, let's identify the areas where we've got issues. I agree with what you just said there. The problem here is they've given up all their strengths to start here this split. And actually, like, I think this would be this is where you can't only put it on the Melzek guy, because I don't know what he can do with these pieces that he's got right now. This is like, the analogy would be, he's trying to do a jigsaw puzzle that doesn't have the pieces. Like, I don't know how you get out of this situation. Like, because again, what strength do they have right now? You know what I mean? I really struggle to find any positive quality. Dude, even on the GX one, a team I think is worthless. They have the Jackie's guy though. There's a win condition. Get him on one of his champions. Get him into a mid game so he's actually fucking ahead. He can do so. I don't know what you do with this squad. Like, it's just a mess.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. It's like from the flip side, if anything, it's like the winter split then is like to Melzer's credit.
Yeah,
they managed to figure out the meta.
Yeah.
They managed to enable players that turned out to not be great, which like a lot of us saw. It's like, I'm with you 100% with like Midwin looked super interesting. I was very excited to see like the level of play on his unique champions that he played, and I thought Alvaro was legit as fuck, and I wasn't sold on Frescawi and Super, and to manage to piece together in a league that was like, I think winter was in turmoil, like LEC has been in turmoil the whole fucking year. I give credit to Melzer then, because it turns out, like, as you said yourself, it's like the pieces just aren't there. I have no fucking clue where they go from here.
I've got a tough question for you.
Situation.
Here's what's funny, right? Is on the whole topic of Super, I think unfortunately, because his statements in media are so memeable, people don't even really have the discussion. What they do is, you're either a Spanish fan and you're like, well, you've got to believe in yourself, or you just go, what a stupid statement. He's obviously nowhere near as good as all these literal like Hall of Fame level Koreans that he will never be as good. Like he didn't even make it plausible. He didn't even make it like, I think I'm better than Ice. Like, I don't think so, Super, but fair play. You play against him every day. He's going like, I'm better than Deft. It's like, in what fucking universe, mate? Like, what? Did he go in the future? Does he break his hand? What are you talking about? So the point is, as a more serious point though, I actually want to ask this, Yamato, because I actually do feel like that's sort of a rhetorical trick that people use. They always make it sound like if they like a player and the player goes, I am the best, but they're obviously not. They go, hey, he's got to have confidence. You got to believe you're the best to play and to compete. Like, look, on some level, there's a grain of truth there. Obviously, you should be confident. You should believe I've got to play my game. If I do the things I can do, I can win too. The problem is, I want to ask you for real, what do you do in this case though? Because I actually do think confidence could only go so far. Like, I thought for real, I was just misreading like his vibe. I thought in the early interviews, like, is this sort of like he's half joking or something? And I'm just not getting the vibe. But I can tell, bro, I think he's serious. Like, I actually think for real when he says these statements, he actually does think he is an insanely cracked out ADC, or that I actually sort of buy it. I think he believes it. So my question to you would be this. You do want a player to have confidence, but isn't there a point at which it can be delusional? What do you think?
Yeah, I think the line is ambition and delusion. Right? I think with the statement that he made, he throws his own team under the bus, because if he believes that he's the best and his team is not winning, then clearly his team must be bad, right?
Yeah, bro, they're like 1-6 and they've got depth, prime depth. So fucking hell, that's some pretty shit. You're right. Yeah,
he just throws them under the bus. I think if it's not like the Muhammad Ali thing. It's like, I am the greatest. Right. It's like the angle is that you should frame it in the shape of ambition. It's like, I want to beat this guy. I'm coming after this guy. I want to beat them. I want to be the best. I'm going to show everyone that I can be the best. It's like, if you frame it like that, it's like, okay, fair play. It's like you tie it to your work method. It's like It's like I like to frame my work in the sense that it's like I tell my players, it's like we need to work with ambition. We need to work with the ambition that we want to win it all. Doesn't matter how distant it is, because people are gonna tell us that we are delusional. But every day we need to put in the work as if that is our ambition.
Yeah.
And if you separate the work method and remove yourself from everything else, then it's fine. But to plain and simple say I am better than Deft, it's too blatant. It's too delusional. It's too harsh. Like even to play like Jankos, yeah, there was like this interview. It's like, yeah, it would be weird for me to say that we want to win worlds, but so we want to win the LEC. It's like, yeah, that's fair play. Like, no one's gonna fucking hold him against that. He didn't say, well, I'm gonna win LEC no matter what. Yeah, that's not what he said.
Yes, it's like this show, Yamato. This show isn't as good as Summoning Insight because Summoning Insight is the GOAT. But one day it might be, but just not on this episode.